some of that responsibility is on you. That other person or those people are not responsible for fulfilling all your needs.
Right.
Even something as simple as an orgasm, right? I'm a great advocate for my own orgasms. Even if I'm in a partnered moment, if I didn't get off, I'm going to make sure I got off.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm with you.
There
girl.
you go.
Welcome. Today I have Kaamna Bhojwani, who is a certified, I'm going to read this because it's so impressive, certified sexologist, media personality, and thought leader. Kaamna will take you on a journey through the past, present, and future of sex. As the host of Kaamna Live, she breaks taboos daily, addressing such topics as sexless marriages and infidelity. Today, she is amongst the foremost leaders studying sex and technology, including AI and the future of intimacy. Kaamna has 3 degrees in psychology, including a master's in spiritual psychology from Columbia, where she studied sexual shame formally. Her life's philosophy is simple. Nothing in the human experience is profane, so let's talk about it. Love it. So aligned. So aligned.
Don't you love it when you write your own bio? Yeah. I'm like, oh, wow, who's that impressive person? I'm like, oh, it's me.
Right. When you hear it with someone else saying it, it always sounds a little bit different. But wow, well, Kaamna and I met here at the Sexual Health Alliance conference, and she just did a wonderful talk on sexual shame. So I thought it would be the perfect opportunity for us to talk about it, particularly as my my audience is very much in that midlife where there's a lot of things related to shame. So let's talk first a little bit about what shame is, and then sexual shame in particular.
Sure. So when we talk about, I'll take it back one step and talk about sexuality. Just to clarify that when we talk about sexuality, we're not talking about sex. Sex is one piece of it. It's one piece of the pie, right? It's not the whole thing. Sexuality is how you show up in the world, how you feel about yourself, who you love, how you love, what turns you on, desire, consent, sexual justice, all of those things. Sexual shame then is when you're made to feel bad, or when you feel bad about any of those aspects. So you can see that it runs quite a wide gamut. Yes. And I started studying sexual shame, not intentionally. I was studying sexuality. But very quickly, I think 2 or 3 months into my study, I was like, oh my God, we have to delve into this shame piece, because it hits us all across the world, across age spans.
What would be some of the signs of sexual shame?
So we're just beginning to study sexual shame in men, which is a shame, right? Should have been doing it right from the beginning. Right. But essentially, it is people feeling bad about their bodies, right? So body image issues, low self-esteem, low confidence. In women, it is linked to anxiety and depression. In men, it leads to more isolation. Men just tend to shut down. In both genders, where, and I'll say both genders, and I'm the first to admit that I don't have a large non-binary sample, and I intend to change that as I do more research. But generally, across the genders, we're seeing that it's why people don't report sexual violence. It's why people are hesitant to seek help. So it really hits across a number of aspects. I'm very curious to see how all those things impact how you do professionally. Right? There are some studies that show that people that have better sex lives do well professionally, they do better at work. And you can sort of see that, right? Things are going well at home, You're feeling good about yourself. And conversely, when those things are absent, how does that impact? Because I'm skeptical enough to think that if we can prove that there's an ROI to helping eliminate sexual shame, right? Then suddenly we'll be doing better.
Yeah, I actually there is research that shows that if you have sex before work, you're more productive. So everybody take that note, right? When we're talking about midlife in particular, so, kids don't learn about sex, and now we're moving into midlife, and in particular, my experience as a midlife woman who's divorced, there's a different kind of shame. There's embarrassment about not knowing how to get back into sex. Yeah. There's embarrassment about the physical changes of the body. Yeah. There's just embarrassment about like going on a date. Like how do I show up? What do I do?
It's funny, I'm giggling because I'm in the same boat, right? I'm in my 40s and I'm going through a divorce, and dating apps didn't exist the last time I was single. And it certainly is the learning curve. And you're absolutely right. There is a lot of shame and stigma for people in their middle age. Because the idea that it's a very old patriarchal notion, right? Sex is for reproduction. So once you start shutting down, those functions start shutting down. What the hell do you need sex for? Of quite the opposite.
Right.
People I interview in their 50s and their 60s, when they've gotten their hormones and all those things sort of in check, so they're through the tunnel, if you will, they are ready for more intimacy.
Oh, yeah.
They're ready to be seen. They say things like, I feel good in my body, I look good, and I want to go out and reconnect. The problem is often they're in relationships where that whole dynamic has already changed and they don't know how to claw back from that. That's hard. Because women will come to me and say, shit, I've been in a sexless marriage for 10 years. I've gone through this transformation. I've gone through this, this biological, spiritual, emotional transformation, and I'm better on the other side of it. I don't know how to bring my partner along. And that strikes at the shame piece in healthcare professionals. I don't know about you, but I don't know a lot of healthcare professionals that are willing to help women or that are capable of helping women focus on their sexual wellness. We're very quick to talk about hot flashes and weight gain and, oh my God, my mood swings and staying up at night. But my girlfriends who are in their 50s will tell me, I'm embarrassed to ask my doctor about lube or any of these basic things.
Just a quick interruption. On December 12th, if you're in the Los Angeles area, I will be co-hosting an event with Dr. Ashley Winter, who is a urogynecologist and a menopause specialist. We'll be talking about hot flashes and hot nights, so everything related to menopause, sex, your sexual health, as well as offering this group of women a community to share some stories, ask questions, and just feel free to be amongst people who are in the same boat as you. There'll be some wine, some refreshments. The link is in the show notes, or you can email me, Karen at Taboo to Truth.
That was my experience. I mean, when I talk about it, when I got divorced, all of a sudden I had this sexual awakening, and I was in a relationship, and I started having issues with orgasm.
Yeah.
And I remember going to my doctor and I was like, I'm sort of embarrassed to say this. And her first line of defense was, you're getting divorced, there must be a lot of emotional upheaval.
Right.
And indeed that was part of it, but I'm
Sure.
like, but no, like we're having sex in cars, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't have an orgasm.
for
Like,
you,
what's going on here? And it turned out I ended up going to she finally referred me to a sexual medicine practice, but
Yeah.
they helped me, and it really led me to where I am today. They really helped me be able to talk about it, because
Yeah.
you walk in there, and not only are they, asking you all these intimate questions, but they literally gave me a vibrator and said, go in the other room and
Yeah,
try
good.
that. And I think
yeah.
like that, when you get divorced or when you go through menopause, you should be given hormones and a vibrator.
Yes,
if you've never had
exactly.
one before.
Exactly, and maybe an edible. I don't know, something. Just chill out and enjoy it, right?
Right.
That sort of thing. No, I think I think it's a problem. I think that's the shame piece on both ends.
Right.
Women who feel that they are not entitled to it, that there's somehow, oh my God, I'm so past the shelf life, I shouldn't be asking these questions. And then medical practitioners and healthcare practitioners that are just not equipped, because again, they haven't dealt with their own biases around
Right.
this, right? That's a real issue.
Right. I mean, menopause, that whole conversation is just starting now. Forget
Yeah.
about sex. I actually had an experience, and I'll make it more about you, but just
no, it's all related.
relevant.
Yeah.
I was at a wedding, and I sat across. I just talked about this in my episode on testosterone, and I asked. He was an endocrinologist, and I said, this is the work I do. What do you think of testosterone? Because it's actually, unfortunately, controversial for women. And he went. The first thing he said was, a little bit. And then I said, okay. He said, and just for libido. And I'm like, and? Like, is there anything wrong with it? Just, and he kept repeating these two things, a little bit, just for libido. I'm like, yeah, that should be like number one. Don't you want us to have libido?
Then why are we hushing around it?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's true.
Exactly.
And by the way, on the flip side, we're not doing men any favors in this education department either, right? Because as we talked about earlier, andropause is real. Yeah. Menopause, right? It's a drop in testosterone after a certain age, decrease in libido, decrease in muscle mass, receding hairlines, all the things that make a man masculine start depleting, and we don't tell them. We don't tell them that this is happening, so they think it's them. And then they go to these like secret tea parties where men are injecting themselves with testosterone. Wow. I get it, but it shouldn't be a secret.
Wow, interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a tea party.
A tea. A tea party. Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Took me a minute.
But again, it's under the covers, and it's all this shame-based stuff. When actually we would all come up and say sexual wellness is very much linked with overall wellness, and it doesn't have a shelf life. It's not something. I've heard people talk about all these longevity, gurus and biohackers. You want to live to be 120? You want to be sexless for all of that? No, thank you.
And you'll live longer if you have more sex, and you'll have better relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
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 So how do we talk to the change in culture around, for a long time, for a period of time now, we've been talking about the patriarchy and women are feeling more in their power.
Yep.
And I recently spoke with a young woman who's in her 40s and she's been single and hasn't been able to find a partner. She said, we were sold a bill of goods because we went and we became, powerful and, we're great in the boardroom, and now men don't know what to do with us. And there's that sort of reverse roles where now we're sort of shaming men into behaving better towards us.
Yeah, I think it's true, and at the same time, I love men. I feel deeply empathetic for the boxes that we've put men in, right? So male, and I'll come around to answering your question, but male sexuality, and as far as I'm concerned, has been as restricted as female sexuality, different ways, right? For men, it's all about performance, it's all about numbers, right. How big, how long, how many, etc. Men will come and say, I have to be the initiator. Right, the sexual initiator at the man, and I'm constantly being rejected. What do we think? They're Mr. Potato Head, that they don't have feelings, that's not going to be internalized in the same way. So I think that while we empower women and we bring women along, we've got to reach over to the men and bring them along with. And it's a little bit harder because as much as we've screwed women in so many ways, the one thing we've given them is permission to ask for help, right? It's perfectly acceptable for women to sit together and huddle and be in a circle and kumbaya and talk about their problems to some degree, but we don't do that to men. We don't give them that permission. They're only allowed to be vulnerable with their partner, and frankly, if your penis is not doing what you think it should be doing, your partner might be the last person you want to be vulnerable with. So it's really, really complicated, and I think we have to do a better job of bringing along men and people who present as men.
You mentioned the dating apps and dating app culture, and how has that impacted all of this, and how can we shift? I mean, I have been I feel like perpetually on and off of it for 10 years, and I'm learning to sort of gauge and understand and read into the profiles. I'm also doing this work and meeting people in the field, but what is going on with that, and how do we approach it in a way that is healthy?
I think that we have to understand that our technologies represent our collective psyches and mindset on any particular topic, right? Because ultimately we are fueling it with the data. We are, even in an AI world, right? Ultimately it is generative in that it is building on itself, but we are feeding in those inputs that it's building on. So when we talk about the bad behavior on social media, I think that we have to own that we've taken these spaces where we can maybe have a real profile or maybe not have a real profile, or behave in ways that we would not behave in real life. I think we have to hold people accountable to that. And you and I were both in a session yesterday where we talked about social media as just dating apps are a tool. Yeah. So use them wisely. Use them when you know that they're going to fuel positive emotion and not exacerbate negative feelings. Yeah. And I think, don't take everything personally. Right? When people are assholes on dating apps, which they are, I've been ghosted, I've had some really stupid things being said to me. I hold myself to a higher standard. Let's put it that way. And if that person on the other end does not have that, then I've dodged a bullet, as it were. So I think it's a little bit about putting it in perspective. I'm a huge fan of in-person meeting, but I'm an extrovert. I understand that that's an advantage that I have because I like 3D energy. I like meeting people. But I think it's nice to have a balance. So not relying exclusively on apps and finding maybe the courage to put yourself in places where you might find like-minded people, even if it's just activity-based and not necessarily with an outcome of finding someone romantic.
Yeah, I think that's part of the whole, and I think that's part of the issue with apps and in real life. It's this goal-oriented, I'm going to find my soulmate, the one, my partner in crime, whatever the cliche is.
And can we just go back to dating apps aside, that's just too much to put on one person.
Exactly.
Right? And that's why we find ourselves in these unfulfilling relationships, because marriage was never meant to be like that. Long-term relationships, one person, first of all, again, coming back to the fact that we're living too long, we used to die at 40, that was great. But, you can't, some of that responsibility is on you. That other person or those people are not responsible for fulfilling all your needs.
Right.
even something as simple as an orgasm, right? I'm a great advocate for my own orgasms. Even if I'm in a partnered moment, if I didn't get off, I'm going to make sure I got off.
Absolutely. I'm with you,
There you
girl.
go, right.
And it's important to have that communication with your partner where that's okay.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and what's interesting is that I've been in a few relationships or intimate situations recently where the man has had issues, and I think a couple of them were definitely shame-based, and it was like they're able to get hard, but then they're not able to ejaculate.
Yeah.
And fortunately, vibrators are my friends, and and I know my body, and that works. And it becomes actually a shame. I want them to, and so it's like I guess I am shaming them without even realizing it.
It's that whole thing about, not everything is about you. You don't have to take everything so personally.
Right.
I think it's actually a plus that you're comfortable enough with somebody to be like, I got this. Watch me. Play with me.
Right.
Stay here. Hold, be close. That sort of thing. And it takes, it's uncomfortable, but I think it takes a little bit of work on both parts, especially as after a certain age range, everybody's bodies are changing. Right. In fact, I told a lover recently, I was like, enjoy, you're getting me in my perimenopausal phase. I don't fucking know what's going on, but we'll figure it out.
Well, Lisa Mosconi's brain research, one of the things that the menopause brain, it does change. She's looked at the images, but basically what she also found, and I've heard this there's another study, Cosmo and the Kinsey Institute, that basically when we're over 60, we get the I don't give a fuck, or I like to give fucks, but the real kind attitude. So it gets better.
Oh my God.
It changes, but it gets better.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think there's a self-responsibility component here, and I tell people that all the time. If you're old enough to drive and you're old enough to vote, you are old enough to take your sexuality in your own hands. And if you're a grandmother, okay. Let me tell you this. I grew up in India, as I mentioned, and the number of women in their 60s and 70s, my friends' parents, grandparents, etc., the women that message me privately on Facebook and tell me how much they love my work, I'm like, listen, I'm so happy that you're able to do that, but I wish you would do it in a more public way than DMing me, right? So I think it takes courage and some intentionality to get to that 0 fucks or many fucks given at a certain stage. I don't think everybody gets there.
Yeah, I guess for you and I, it's easy to do. But
who knows? Honestly, I think this journey is, I certainly experience a lot of shame. I don't experience shame, but I get a lot of pushback for what I do as an Indian woman who talks very openly about sex at dinner parties. There's always a joke about a vibrator. Some stupid man will come and ask me some stupid question. They're not stupid men, but the only way they can get comfortable with talking about sex is by making a joke, right? Or making some misogynistic joke about a big dick, and then I'll flood them with data, and then they go away because that's not the conversation that they wanted to have. But we use humor a lot as a substitute for real conversations.
Right. So how does one educate more, at least at the later stage in life, and is there hope for us?
I think there is hope. I think conversations like this are hope. I think, as I shared earlier, I think we have to understand that sexuality is deeply personalized and deeply individualized, and it really is your own responsibility and your own prerogative. So the agency piece, like we were talking about earlier, if you're in your 50s, 60s, whatever, and you're feeling like your body's changing and there are tools out there for you, and your healthcare provider is not willing to help you, you got to switch. You got to ask around. You got to ask your friends, what are you doing? When my friends now sit around, it's like literally like all the resources. Somebody's recommending CBD. Somebody's using an estrogen cream. And I like the community coming together, but it certainly shouldn't be the only resource that we have.
Right, and I love that younger women are having these conversations because my generation, on some level, at least on the menopause conversation, really lost out. But we don't have to. We're not dead yet, so we really need to move forward.
It's ridiculous that we're just now. Oh yeah, HRT. All my friends are calling me like, oh my God, this was a game changer. And I remember my mother being like, I'll never take HRT. I remember her saying that, and what transpired for her in those 10, 15 years, how she silently went through this passage, only she knows.
Right.
My sister and I know it was rough. But
and I remember my mother took Premarin, but I still remember her walking with a little fan around the house, but it wasn't talked about. It wasn't anything we spoke about. Yeah. And there's still a lot of shame around the word menopause. I gave this example yesterday. I was on a YouTube Live. My sister forbid me. She said, I'll come to your house for, I believe it was last year's Thanksgiving dinner. She said, I'll come, but you cannot talk about menopause. And I'm like, I won't talk about sex if that bothers you, but really menopause?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I'm okay not being beaten over the head by it, by
Right.
anything really.
Right.
But people are suffering, and I really think that we've come so far as a species. Really,
Yes.
we can't just help people along in the next 30, 40 years or the last phases of their lives. Whatever.
Right. And I guess it goes with the like, oh, I need help. That back to your
Yeah.
shame. Like I have
Yeah.
to ask for help. Well, yes,
Yeah.
your body needs help.
I would say I'm a big fan of ancient cultures and ancient philosophies, and I try and eat and work through like an Ayurvedic system, etc. I think that it's wonderful. Unfortunately, people in those days didn't live that long.
That's right.
So we can't look back and really be like, how was it in your 80s and 90s? Because a lot of them, the life expectancy was a lot lower back then.
Right, and
so
we-
we're stuck with this over-researched, technology-driven kind of trying to find, profit-driven enterprises. We're really trying to find authentic solutions here.
So anything else in particular around any of this that you would like to add before I ask my regular
I
final
want
question?
to add that none of this is easy. I mean, we've battled obstacles in our own lives to come to a sexology conference and to put ourselves out there and to have these conversations, and that shouldn't be your listeners' goals, right? Everybody's got to be on their own path and has got to end up where it's right for them. But at the end of the day, I think the goal is to lead a life that is authentic and full of vitality, and your sexuality is a critical part of that.
I love that.
It just is.
I love that. And before we end, I ask my final question.
Sure.
And you talked about what sexuality is, but in your personal definition, what is sex? I should have warned you this was
You should have
coming.
warned me. It's
There's no wrong answer.
no, I know. I'm just thinking of the reason you think after all the work that I've done that I don't have a definition for sex, because I think it varies.